Ooh, this part's going to be interesting. I think you might know this well. This part is all about you. Who is Anthony Kinslow? So to begin with, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
I have no clue. Everyone asks that question and they have an answer like, oh, I wanted to be this or I want to be that. I really had no strong urge to be anything in particular. I knew I wanted to have an impact on, on my community, for my family. And eventually that changed to I want to have an impact on the country, right? Like it grew as my experiences grew. Actually, studying abroad in Australia was one of those kind of changing moments in my life that really expanded how I saw the world and where I wanted and how large I wanted my impact to be. But yeah, I didn't have I wanted to be this growing up.
Okay.
Yeah, I had one of my biggest kind of mentors was a civil engineer, and he was my great uncle, one of the first Black faculty members at UC Davis in California. And when I went to college, he said, you should be an engineer. You like math and you like people. You should be a civil engineer. And so that's why I chose that. that was the reasoning for going to civil engineering was that. That was it. There was no other, thought behind it.
Good God. I must say, like, I don't know anyone who grows up and goes, I want to be an engineer one day. Being of Indian background is quite the opposite. Your parents go, you will be an engineer one day. It's a little bit different, I must say. For me, very early on, I think I wanted to be a police person. I wanted to be in the army. I just wanted to protect people. I got a bit older and I really wanted to be an Olympian. I thought that was cool, being an Olympian. I got a little bit older, still in school, and we learned about like Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey and how they can potentially help businesses. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to save businesses. And then I got a bit older and it just kept changing. It just kept changing. It's really
fair enough.
And I think the reason it kept changing is because we're always growing up. Like I've never been this old before, and tomorrow is a new day, and I've never been that old before, and the day after, and so on and so forth. And like you said, traveling and meeting different people and seeing different things and experiencing different parts of life, what we want to be just keeps evolving. Now, I was doing some research on you. I found out your middle name is Dylan. Are you named after Bob by any chance?
No, I am named after my dad.
Okay, so his middle name is Dylan.
I'm Anthony Dylan Kinslow II. I believe my dad was born around the same time as Bob Dylan, so maybe Bob Dylan was after him.
Interesting. Does anyone call you Dylan?
Very few people. My nickname typically is Deuce.
Deuce.
Yeah.
Like that tennis thing where
exactly.
You're both on the same score.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Why?
So I apparently resemble my great-grandfather, who they called Daddy Deuce. So that and I'm the second, right? So it worked.
So you're like a Deuce squared.
Sure.
Cool. Okay. Fair enough. So what drew you to study civil engineering was going to be my next question, but you already answered that. You had this person you looked up to, your uncle, who was your mentor. Okay, so that's good. But why a PhD? Was it something that you wanted or something that you needed?
It was something I thought I needed. It was, I'm a Black man in America. I want to make sure that no one ever tells me that I'm not qualified for something. And the only way to guarantee that is to have the highest academic achievement possible, which is a PhD. So that was the driving force for it. I enjoy research. Don't get me wrong. That first reason wouldn't have been enough to be successful and complete a PhD. I enjoy research. I enjoy the idea that I know more about this one specific thing than anybody else in the world. To get a PhD, the mark is that you have to provide a significant contribution to knowledge.
That's to original content, right? Like something new, not something like copy paste it from Wikipedia.
Exactly. And
There
so,
goes that PhD opportunity.
yeah, I mean, come on. I'm sure you got a few ideas that are novel up in that head of yours.
One day. Okay.
But yeah, that was the reasoning. It was I didn't want anybody to tell me I couldn't do something or I wasn't qualified for something because of the color of my skin.
Have you become overqualified since doing your PhD though? Because that's something that happens here all the time, right? Like when I did my bachelor's, people were like, yeah, you need to study a bit more. I did my master's, they were like, you studied too much. So being a PhD, I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah. If I didn't have my own company, sure, right? I would be getting told, oh no, you're overqualified for this position. Sorry, right? But with a PhD in a business, it's actually like a double-edged sword because people just assume that you're like super nerdy and you don't know how to do business, or they're like, oh, he really knows what he's talking about. We'll listen to him, right? So it's like you get both, actually, depending on the person. Interesting.
Now you said with your PhD, like you know about this one particular topic better than most, if not anyone out there. So can you tell us about your PhD?
Let's see.
Like the 100-word summary as opposed to the 20 million
simple version of it, right?
Documentation with data and all the, no, just like a 100-word summary.
Okay, so I was investigating whether there was I'm not going to use the word easy, whether there was a scalable way to prioritize which homes we should upgrade first, simply by looking at their energy data and the local weather. And what I was able to find using a statistical method that is most frequently used in psychology, epidemiology being the study of disease and etc. So think research that is centered around people, right? I applied that statistical model to a building science kind of a framework and was able to identify and prioritize homes at a higher clip than anyone had before. So I could more accurately prioritize, say, 10 homes for which ones would produce the greatest potential energy savings for upgrading your HVAC equipment or adding insulation to your roof using my method. So that's what my PhD was about.
Interesting. What did you discover about yourself during this process?
I think the biggest thing was my ability I'm now better at identifying when I'm self-sabotaging myself. The thing about the PhD, for most people, depending on your advisor, some people have advisors who are like, you have this deadline. But usually in a PhD, it's just this free-flowing thing where there's no real strong deadlines. And so you have to kind of self-impose things for yourself. And which means that it's really easy to kind of self-sabotage. It's really easy to just start going down a rabbit hole, which you know isn't really worth anything. It's not going to make any significant difference, but you spend 2 months just doing this one thing for no reason at all. Because quite honestly, you're afraid to take the next step. You're afraid that if you present your material to this group of professors, then they'll point out something that you missed. And everything you've been working on is just ruined, right? Like these things are fundamental fears that propagate your process of a PhD. And so being able to recognize these kind of points in my life or moments when I was doing things like that really, I think, was the biggest thing that I learned about myself. It was kind of my being more attuned to how I was thinking and my internal kind of compass and mindset and mentality.
Interesting. I like that. Okay, one more question, which is PhD-ish related. What did you discover about society during your studies?
Not much. I mean, the thing about a PhD is you're supposed to laser focus into one thing, right? And you take a bunch of other things and you put it together and you just dig down, straight down. And so I wouldn't say I'm learning anything about society during my studies. I learned about society after my studies.
Okay. People treat you different, they look at you different. Like, you're a smart person. Did your bachelor's in engineering, you did your master's in engineering, and then you said, I'm going to do a PhD. Do people look at you different? Do they talk to you different? Do they ask you stupid questions or really smart questions? Or even, what does PhD stand for? Like, how did society treat you?
I mean, I'm still a black man in America, so there's only a limit to how much that's going to change. People who know I have a PhD, there's definitely a sense of acknowledgement that maybe I know what I'm talking about. I don't have to prove that I'm intelligent to them before they actually start listening to me. They automatically come to the table assuming that I'm intelligent, which is a huge benefit. But I think that's, people want to hear what I have to say, right? I think that's the biggest difference, is that there's a desire for me to give my opinion on something, which is nice. It pays the bills. But fundamentally, my day-to-day life, having a PhD doesn't really change anything.